All right, so I'm gonna ask y'all, I guess one simple question is who is the best storyteller that you all know, and why are they the best storyteller?
Personally,
Yeah,
or
in general, who comes to mind?
um, the first person that comes to my mind is um, the lead female character from Out of Africa,
Hmm,
Meryl Streep, the role that she played. Um,
out of
and
Af-
this, yeah. Uh, in fact,
uh,
I thought about that when we were talking about oral culture and print culture.
so you're saying Meryl Streep's character in Out of Africa is a fantastic storyteller?
Yes, I mean, yeah, yeah. I mean, just as an example.
Yeah, that's great. And why would you say she's a great storyteller mainly?
Um, she captivated, well, granted, she maybe had one or two only in her audience, but her stories seem to be captivating.
Hmm. There was something about her that people were drawn to her storytelling ability.
Or yeah, or the way that she wove this story, um, and it seemed, yeah, to take the listener in.
Okay. What other great storytellers do we know?
I think about my my pastor.
Mhm.
He often, of course, shares stories during his sermon, but there have been other opportunities that I've had to hear him, and it's just um, I know some folks who tell great stories, but they get hung up on details that aren't really relevant, so you kind of lose momentum in the story and get sidetracked, or people that go off on different tangents, and it's hard to focus on what they're telling you. And he just has an engaging way to tell the story. Um, if he forgets a fact, he might spend a couple minutes as well, and move on so that it's easy to keep up with and stay with the story.
So I think, would you say he does a great job of giving you like bite-sized pieces so it's not everything at once? Am I
Yes.
hearing that correctly?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I think of like a rope, like you're just kind of little by little pulling you to where he wants you to go, if you will.
Right.
Okay,
Right.
fantastic.
About Garrison Keeler on NPR,
Yeah.
where he just has a way of kind of setting the stage so you can picture everything that's happening. It kind of engages all the senses.
Mhm.
About being at the fair or something, and you can smell the food and or just the bright sunshine. It describes things really well, so you feel like you're in the story.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Yes, killer. When I think of NPR, I actually think of Guy Raz. I don't know if y'all have ever listened to the podcast How I Built This, but he is fantastic storyteller. How he takes you and weaves you into the stories of entrepreneurs and their founding ventures.
Also, the way he incorporates music, I think sometimes the music incorporated can bring people in.
So there's a new concept, right? Music or some kind of additional stimulation to pulling people in. Yeah. On one end, I think of my 7-year-old who, like, it feels like I'm there anytime she tells a story. But I also, she wants to tell me the long end of the story when we're in in a crunch time. But I do admire her storytelling ability because of the intricate details she may share there. But yeah, when I thought of this question, I immediately thought of Guy Raz because that's something I listen to pretty consistently as well. Um, so Any other comments on storytellers or anything y'all would like to share? Okay. So I gotta ask y'all, any questions from the content this last week? Any comments? I know we had some daylight savings mix up, so I totally get that. Or what was new from this last week? What stood out? What moved you? Oh man. All right. So y'all tell me y'all had a really easy easy experience recording yourselves and facilitating. How was that? I guess let's jump onto the awkwardness of facilitating on screen. I will note it probably does feel awkward to say, hey, I'm leading a virtual class in this setting. I have to tell you, having taught the last 2 years all exclusively via Zoom, it was very awkward the first couple of months. It gets easier, but in this sense, when you're mocking a facilitation kind of style that's meant to be in person, I do want to ask, like, how was it? How was this kind of new territory for some of you?
It was challenging. I was just thinking about the acting out of the story of Eva and Isaac. We can't do that, you know, they're just practically, so just trying to come up with some creative way to interact with the story still. I was really disappointed that the emojis didn't show up in the recording.
Yeah.
It was really cute. But yeah, it kind of challenges you to think a little differently.
Yeah. So I hear challenging, I hear different. I think the modality isn't always comfortable in terms of, yeah, I haven't done a faith and finances class online, but you know, the props or the acting out of skits maybe really, I imagine is very difficult to accomplish. Julie, did you have something there?
I was just gonna, for me, online, or if we'd been able to all be in the same room, it's interesting that I don't get nervous about getting up in front of the group, a live group, rural class, facilitating, but the whole idea that I was going to be evaluated made me really nervous.
Well, I only give pass-fail grades, so I hope you. I'm kidding, guys. I think part of this activity, yeah, I think my process here is to give you feedback. I imagine most of it's going to be positive, but I might make some suggestions or tweaks in terms of facilitation. But sometimes it is a little unfair that my only experience is to see you through a video, if you will. But again, I think my process to be able to give you all some feedback. I think early in my facilitation journey, like 10 years ago, feedback was everything for me. Just, hey, you say too much, or you should pause, or you talk too fast, or your voice is sitting in the back of your throat. Like you really need to use the high end part of your voice so people can hear you enunciate. Like there's things like that were very helpful. Julie, I know you've facilitated before, and I'm sure some of y'all have facilitated as well. So don't expect a harsh red pen grading on your facilitation either.
I think having others watch, but also there's a lot of value in watching yourself and hearing your own like voice tone and all the things that you said. But there's just a lot of value. You are your own worst critic, and so watching yourself, you really can get better. So that was a good exercise.
Did anybody else go back and watch theirs, or were y'all too terrified to watch your own facilitation?
Well, I'm not looking forward to it, but now that I know the videos are there, I have to go, do the other evaluation anyway. So it's like, wait, you're going to make me do it, and then you're going to make me watch it? Seriously?
You could watch your own, or you can watch someone else's.
I had fun doing it, but it was nerve wracking. And I haven't seen our video yet, so I'll have to go back and look at it. But I mean, I had a good time. I think that our group, we worked well together and we did some communication. So I didn't have a problem with it. It was fun.
It
Once
was
you got
fun.
the bugs out.
Yeah, it was fun. Y'all made it fun. Thank you.
Glad to hear it was fun. I think a couple thoughts here when it comes to how many of y'all imagine you doing faith and finances online? Most of y'all are probably doing it in person or plan to do it in person. One thing that like I always note about like facilitators the first time when they are facilitating courses, and just I would say maybe this is a best practice section, if you will, is like no one knows if you messed up, and even if you skipped content. It's like part of faith and finances, there's a guided curriculum that we're going through. And my suggestion the first time around when you go through faith and finances is stick to the script as much as possible, just so you get a good feeling for the flow of the curriculum. But if you skip something, if you miss something, if you mess up, like no one else knows. So I would always say take a deep breath and just keep pushing through. And you can always come back and say, hey, by the way, I realize I skipped this section. I do want to come back and address this. Right? There are things like that happen in facilitation. The other thing I would say is when you consider facilitation in a room, like consider, I would say, the acoustics and the setup between like how much your voice projects and how far back the person in the back is, if you will, or else a lot of the time people are going to be having trouble hearing you, and so you're going to have to be saying things twice. And so maybe this is more like classroom dynamics setup, but just make sure that people are within good earshot of being able to hear what you're saying. And then again, I think what would help you a lot in this process is having more visuals, props, any of that sort that helps ground what you're saying. I don't know about y'all, but I don't always retain everything that's said out loud, or I have to hear it 2 or 3 times. And so I have to interact with it a different way. And so my encouragement to you is, again, consider some of these other methods for grounding some of the learnings. But I would ask, for those of y'all that were able to facilitate this last week, what is something that you liked about someone else's facilitation style or piece? Not yours, but someone else's.
Tasha, I think, started us off, and I was somewhat intimidated because she did such a great job of making it impromptu. She wasn't reading anything. It didn't look like she was just, talking to us. It just felt comfortable.
Thank you, Julie.
So Tasha inspired confidence in the rest of y'all, would you say? Or did she intimidate you so much that
Or
you
fear. She's a role model.
Okay.
For me.
Fantastic. The beginning part of your guys' video cracked me up because you're like, is this on? Can you hear me? I think y'all had a little bit of that going back and forth. Fantastic. What else? What else did y'all appreciate about someone else's facilitation style in your group?
Well, I watched the other groups and saw Julie kind of at the board writing things down and asking questions, and I just thought she did a good job asking the questions and waiting for responses and just kind of handling that back and forth. Seemed, I don't know, naturally good at it, or just very attentive to letting people talk and not being uncomfortable with silence.
Well, thank you, Bonnie. That's good feedback, because I feel like one of the things I'll struggle with is leaving that empty space after a question. So I appreciate that.
And I would say that's key, because if you keep filling that space, then no one else has an opportunity to fill it. And so you will have a lot of awkward silence in faith and finances classes. I'm just going to throw that out there now. Because most times you might have one person that's really like always the person sharing. So you might need to wrangle them in, but if you don't have that person, then not most times folks don't want to go first in these conversations until you get to like week 4 or 5, once you've built some trust and a little bit of community along the way. Anyone else that stood out this last week? See, there's our awkward silence. By the way, I do note that let's pause our conversation really quick because I realize next week I do need to reschedule our call from Wednesday to potentially Friday, if that works. If not, I would ask if we can push back our conversation a week. Does anybody have one of those that does not work by chance?
I would probably prefer to push it back a week. Fridays are harder for me. I could see if I can make it work if that's the only day that works for everyone else. But if it's just the same, I'd prefer to just go the following Wednesday.
Could we do a 9 PST noon EST time? Not the 23rd, but March the 30th as our final call. Is that an option for y'all? I do apologize. I'm having to travel next week. Not quite what I expected here, but I do need to move our time.
I can probably make that work.
I can make it.
All right. So I'll send an email to the group. Mei-Ling, does that work for you?
Yeah, I just have to double check, but I think I can make it.
Okay. I'll send y'all an email with this as well and a calendar invite. I do apologize. But yeah, I want to make sure. I know, I know I want to figure this out before we leave today. So thank you for being flexible with me, but I do value that last conversation and make sure that we get it in as we wrap up our time. It's crazy to think we're jumping into week 6 already. This has gone by very quickly. I did want to point out one thing, and y'all have probably heard me share this example in this class, but I think of Paulo Freire's book, Pedagogy of the Oppressed. I have that book somewhere on my bookshelf over there, but again, a read that I would encourage anyone who's getting into this kind of space of facilitating with people in poverty, if you will. But he brings in this concept of, usually the instructor, the teacher is this cup of water, right? Oh, you can't even see my cups. That's okay. It's a Dodger cup and a San Diego Zoo cup, if you're wondering what it says. And usually the teacher is this full cup of water full of knowledge, right? And the student comes in a financial literacy course. Think of like financial literacy in banks or in most settings, like even a Dave Ramsey class, I would say, where it's a lot of talking head and it's like, hey, I'm the expert with this full cup and I'm pouring all this into this empty cup, which eventually now you're a full cup with everything I gave you. But in reality, like, would we say that everyone is an empty cup in our classes? I don't feel like people, and Paulo Freire would push back on this, because people aren't really like empty bins that are meant to be filled. They come with plenty of experience and lived experience, if you will, that I would say one forms kind of their perception to what reality is in that point of time. And I mean, who are we to argue with their perception when it's a lived experience, if you will? But at the same time, right, that kind of experience has informed the way they've managed their resources, their finances, and all the above. And so part of it isn't necessarily just throwing more information on top of that. It's like, how do we use what you know and, add to that anchor. If you're, I don't know if y'all read the 4 A's piece, add, anchor, analyze, and away. And so to me, that 4A concept is really fantastic because we come back to, hey, we want to add something to your partially full cup, if you will, or partially empty cup for some of you that might think that way too. And so again, I would really encourage y'all as you bring people into your courses, as Paulo Freire comes back to, even the point of view of people have dignity and people are capable. And so we're not coming in to save these people from their financial chaos per se, but we're here to walk alongside them. And to me, that's a very important distinction because for some of them, it's going to take them, they're going to figure out in 6 weeks. They're going to have a new spending plan. They're going to have a path, a payment plan to paying off debt and all the above on their credit report. And others, they're going to complete the class and they're still thinking about how to create a budget, if you will. That may take a little bit longer. It will be a labor of love. But again, I come back to, I'd say continue to keep this in mind as people have lived experiences that they're bringing into our classes. And they didn't just show up one day and say, this is how I'm going to manage my money. Because as we discovered in our family financial tree, right, some of that is informed by our influences or sometimes the lack of influences along the way. Julie, did you have something there?
I was just gonna, having taught the financial peace Ramsey class, it really is more of a, it's a facilitator. They don't call you a teacher there. And I've done a lot of those and I always learn something from someone in the class.
Yeah.
Always.
You're right. I mean, for me, it was life-changing early on in my marriage too, to go through financial peace with my wife, actually. We also did faith and finances together. But both were helpful in different ways, but my wife and I came from very different opinions on how we manage money. And I'm the manager, she's the spender. And so I think financial peace gave us common language, actually, that met us exactly where it was. So I hope it doesn't sound like I'm bashing Financial Peace University either. It's not my intention.
No, just.
Yeah, but I do want to make the distinction of the intentionality behind the faith and finances curriculum to who the audience is.
Right. Yeah, I loved when she talked about you might be able to answer a lot of the what if, how to questions, but if you just wait, and the person that was sharing the phone plan that they had just found and how they just, really got excited and really, so yes.
Well, as we talk about facilitation in the classroom, students, you've mentioned something about what you liked about other people's facilitation style, and I want to ask you, how do you feel about your facilitation style? What did you learn? What was challenging about that? I think I want to hear a little bit more about what your own experience now.
I didn't realize how slowly I was talking until I watched it. And I thought, oh, I'm not even sure why.
Yeah.
I don't know if I was nervous or just trying to work through the material, but it just felt like I was too slow.
Yeah. And do you feel like that was distracting to you?
It was to me. I mean, I'm not sure if it was to other people, but I found it kind of too slow, too monotonous, maybe.
So there's one thing that some of us may fight against, right? And maybe those are two separate things. They might be one and the same, Bonnie, but tone becomes a really big thing in our classrooms. where it's actually something I had to learn to express emotion in my facilitation style early on. Like, hey, like you should be excited about exclamation points, and you should have a questioning tone when there's a question mark. Like there's things like that that are helpful. You know, I have a facilitator here in Fresno, Larry Hodges. He's like the most animated person I know. And then there's Andrew, who's, you know, cool, calm, and collected, but he has this captivating way of sharing stories and facilitating. And so I come back to, again, I've had to fight with that monotone kind of feeling and knowing that it's me. So there are going to be these, I don't want to call them deficits, Bonnie, right? But things that are like, hey, if I do this all the time, it's not going to help the learning in my classroom. So you have to always fight against that. I am a wanderer, and then one of the, have y'all ever gone to a car dealership where these little inflatable arm guys that are just flailing everywhere? I had a coach one time told me that was me at a training. He's like, you talk way too much with your arms, and it's true. I did, and so there are things. Actually, you probably notice most of the time I have a pen, or I'm holding coffee in my hands because it actually centers me somewhere. And so I would say, Bonnie, if there's something like that you feel like is a common recurrence in your facilitation style, you might need a crutch, I would say. So for Larry, my friend Larry here in town, he actually holds the workbook the whole time, so he doesn't wander too much off topic, because he was a financial advisor with Merrill Lynch for about 40 years. So there's a lot of things that he would like to bring in that he realized I can't do that in the context of this class. Looking snazzy, Pastor Anthony. I need to take tips from your closet there. But thanks for sharing that, Bonnie. Anything else that stood out to you from your own facilitation style this week?
I know that my tendency is actually to talk too fast. And one of the things I thought about as I was reading the Isaac and Eva story, okay, I'm asking for people to act this out. So I probably need to read that intentionally slower so they have time to actually do the acting out of. So.
Absolutely. Two things there I would say is, early on in your classes, I would encourage y'all to like pre-select someone in your group so that you're not volunteering somebody who might be really, really shy at the beginning. Like you might have an idea who, or, you know, even just prepping somebody for, say, hey, I'm going to have you go up to the front of the room would be helpful. But you're right, Julie. I think kind of that script reading, if we want people to act it out, we will need to give them some time, some pauses to, I read this. All right, class, now let's look at Eva and Isaac, right? I think there is kind of some of that dynamic that should happen in that process. So that's actually a fantastic observation. I'm impressed you identified this over Zoom. I think that's a fantastic skill to have.
You mentioned tone. One thing I was consistently counseled on when I was working during the annual review was my tone. It was sometimes a little abrupt, and so.
Abrupt, do you mean like, did it sound harsh or?
Yeah.
And actually, I mean, I would say that's something to be aware of for all of y'all. For our folks, again, to feel part of community, part of family, and not being felt like we're wagging our fingers at them, if you will. I think there is kind of this like, hey, like this is really what you should be doing, but we're here to walk with you, right? There is kind of this fine line between like mercy and grace in the process, and also like the rigidness of like, here's what we really need to stick to. Again, I think our own personalities and facilitation styles might have us lean one way or the other. Any questions about oh, go ahead, Bonnie.
I was just going to say, I know that my own style, when people have given me feedback, is that I'm too soft spoken. Like I just don't project well. And I think that's physical. I just can't do it. So I have to be mic'd a lot. But I also, some people have said, oh, I could listen to your voice and it could just put me to sleep. And I thought, oh, well, I think that's nice, but it's not what I want you to do in a group setting.
Yeah.
So learning to modulate better, maybe, or I don't know.
Yeah.
An issue I've got to work on.
You might have the voice for like a Headspace, or my kids used to use a podcast that would tell them a story with like really soothing voices. It's some of my favorite things. But again, I come back to tone, and you're a little bit softer spoken, so it's something you're going to have to work at if you're facilitating here. So just keep that in mind. Or, again, the way you kind of set up your classroom, to even if it's a horseshoe, if you're sitting at a table together, if you're a smaller group, right? There are strategies that you can employ to make sure that your voice carries all that it needs to. Because I feel like I'm pretty loud, but my voice doesn't actually project great. And if I strain my voice, I actually lose my voice very quickly. And so for me, again, I feel like we might be very similar, Bonnie, in that process, where like Duke University recently wrote an article about our center, and they called me a soft-spoken millennial. And I'm just like, oh man, like I never thought of myself that way. But yeah, I do that, Bonnie. Yeah. Any other final comments or questions about facilitation? This is where I would say a lot of our final conversation would be too, is I'd love to take any questions that you may have around like classroom setup or style or best practices. But is there anything that came up this week or just came to mind now that you would love to get a little bit of feedback or conversation around?
Well, something you just mentioned is setup. You talked about a horseshoe, and it seems like in the videos that I've seen, a lot of times that looks like kind of what they're going for. Is that the best arrangement?
Yeah, I think like a horseshoe is helpful. That way, I think part of the learning, everyone's looking in and can see each other. No one has their back towards you. I've done, depending on the site that we've been in, like some of the community centers where we do our workshops actually only have round tables. So we intentionally only put 4 chairs per table, so no one has their back towards us. The problem with that though is that if I have a classroom of 20 people, we're really spread out over 5 tables. Versus if it was in a horseshoe, right? I think there's a center, there's kind of this horizon, if you will, to your setup. So I personally like the horseshoe model, right? Because this way people aren't looking at each other's backs, but they can see each other as well. But that also might just be preference. I'm sure Chalmers has some studies or has a study that they can reference to why the horseshoe is effective. Other questions? I mean, that's a great question, Julie. How do we set up the room effectively?
I have a question about just the content. You said, early on to kind of follow the script, but is there the intention that we bring additional stories in or ideas that we have, or are we really supposed to be pretty much sticking to the script?
Yeah, I would say, like Faith and Finances and any other curriculum that I've used, right? My suggestion is always, follow the script the first time around, but eventually you want to be able to put some of that in your words that's still true to the content. But again, stories are helpful for people to learn. One thing that you will see in our conversations here is I am using, a guide that I have to ask questions to guide our conversation. But then at the same time, like there's a lot of like off the cuff kind of experiences or stories that I might share with you that I hope most of them are helpful to you and relevant, right? Sometimes I might share something that's like, okay, why did I share that? That it didn't quite meet the purpose of what I was trying to accomplish. But alas, it does happen sometimes. And so in faith and finances and the same thing, I would say there is room for you to share stories, for you to share lived experience. But like Larry Hodges would always say, is trust the process, right? Like try to stick to however the program set up as best as you can, but obviously still put your own twist on it. Yeah. So again, right, there's some balance there. I will say, in my facilitator guide, you probably can't see this. Like you guys can't see that blur. I have like a bunch of notes from over the years and like different examples or stories that actually people have shared in my workshops. Because sometimes they share like fantastic examples of like, hey, this really helped me do this, or hey, this is one of my lived experiences. And so I think on one end, I think it's a lived reality for somebody and it's a real person that we can bring into the conversation. But on the other end, it actually helped build a credibility in my mind, if you will, of like, hey, Carlos has done this a couple times, right? Because personally, like 5 years ago when I was doing faith and finances, I was a 25-year-old kid teaching financial literacy courses, and who am I to teach people financial literacy, if you will. So all that to say is now in my 30s, I feel like it's been a lot. I don't have to build as much credibility, if you will. But again, I would say when you get your facilitator manual, like make it your own. I think at least that's been helpful to me, Bonnie, if you will, is creating space, but be intentional every time rather than. I think there is some room for spontaneity, but I would actually personally, knowing myself and how much of a loose cannon I can be, not allow myself so much space for spontaneity, if you will. But again, that's me knowing myself as a facilitator and my own personal, or my personality, if you will. I hope that's helpful. These are great questions.
So we will be getting a facilitator guide.
Mark, can you hear me? I think I'm not sure if that's included in the price. I think they're like $35 for a facilitator manual. If you do have to order them, I will make sure I get this answer for you.
Okay.
Because I do know, like here in Fresno, when we do ours, we actually charge $350 for the course here locally, which I think is more than what y'all pay. But we actually purchased the guides as part of the package. I don't know if that's included in the price that y'all paid.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we could probably, as I've seen the videos, it looks like it'd be a really easy format to use and hang on to and
It's fantastic.
keep loose.
Next week or in 2 weeks, I'll actually walk you through a document that they have for where you can order materials like that. One thing that they do have a participant guide as well for each participant in your class. That's like, it's also a fantastic resource for your participants. And so their encouragement would be to order one per participant in your class for each course that you have. And so I'll walk y'all through how you would go about ordering them. I do note that y'all, to get access to ordering materials, you do have to complete and be certified by Chalmers, which then generate an email to you saying, here's your login credentials, right? Or here's how to set up your account. So there is another step before we get there. But yeah, I think part of that process is making sure that you do have a video uploaded and there's feedback to you as well. And I sign off on that. And then the final piece next week would be completing the evaluation of this as well. I will say it's a little long, so make sure you set a little bit of time, probably like 5 to 10 minutes. But yes, the facilitation guide is fantastic. Any other final questions about content this last week before I move us to casting vision for this upcoming week? All right, so I would say if y'all haven't been able to complete your facilitation video, just make sure you have that up by Sunday this week. And so again, this is our final week. I'm like kind of shocked it went by this quickly. I don't know if y'all feel that way, but it always feels like we just got this conversation started. So my encouragement is please go into the forum to where the facilitation videos are posted and make, I would say, a positive comment, if you will, for somebody there. Or maybe something, you know, that you learned from somebody, something that you appreciated. But I will ask y'all, is there content? What content are you currently struggling with in this class? Has there been anything that has been brought up that you're like, I still haven't reconciled this. I still have questions about this, because I can actually use that to frame, I mean, some of this conversation, but our conversation in the last week and what resources I can bring in for y'all. Hey, Mark, I hope you're hearing this. I'm doing such a great job. They have no questions. All right, y'all. Well, that's all I have for today. Is there any final comments, questions, rebuttals, rejoinders that would like to be shared today before we close our time in prayer?
Could you repeat the name of the book, the name of the author that you mentioned earlier, please?
Yeah, it's called The Pedagogy of the Oppressed. Let me see.
Thank you.
Put that in the chat here. Oh, it might be in I think it's in my home library actually, but I do have that book. It's a helpful for me reference that I actually, there's like 2 or 3 chapters that I read every year that I think is a helpful centering for me when I go back into teaching each semester. I'm pretty sure I spelled his name wrong, but that should come up. All right, folks, so let me pray for us. And just a reminder, we won't meet next Wednesday. We will skip next Wednesday and then meet our final session on March 30th, but I will send out an email for that. So let's pray. Heavenly Father, thank you again for Zoom. Thank you for technology. Thank you for your word. Thank you for Chalmers. Thank you for the Faith and Finances curriculum. And thank you for each and every person on this call and those that weren't able to join us today, Lord. I pray a special blessing over each of them, their lives, their families, their community, their churches. Lord, may you continue to hold them in the palm of your hand, and that you may continue to invite your spirit in and lead every step that is within your, I would say, the things that you care about, Lord, and the ways that you would love them to invest. So thank you for considering us partners. Thank you for giving us dignity. Thank you for, at the same time, equipping us to do the good work that you've called us to do, Lord. And so may we be faithful in the big things and the little things that you call us to, Lord. And so we submit everything we continue to learn about you and just the beautiful complex world that we get to serve, Lord. And so thank you again for this medium to learn more about stewardship, to learn more about shalom, and again to meet new friends along in this journey, Lord. So thank you for my brothers and sisters today. So all things spoken, all things unspoken, we give you thanks today, Lord. We love you. Amen.
Amen.
All right, friends. Well, thank you for your time. I will see y'all not next week, but on March 30th. But I will have all your feedback for your videos done by next week as well. So I look forward to watching the ones I haven't watched yet.
Thank you, Carlos.
Thank you.
Go in
Thank-
peace.
Thank you.